dear futurists, creative thinkers, and amazing creative people around the world. I'm Ekaterina, co-founder of Future London Academy, and I'm so excited to be here today because it is a special episode of our Creative Capes podcast. We decided to spice up the format a little bit, and today's special edition is called Design Hotline. And the whole idea of this episode is that we will be helping our design community with their challenges, problems, questions, everything else that is on their mind. And to help with this issue and challenge and big goal of ours, I have two amazing guests today, Sam and Mike from Read Words. Welcome, Sam and Mike.
Hi there. Great to be here.
Amazing. So for those of you who don't know what Read Words are and never heard of them, they're a London-based studio that does all sorts of writing for brands and companies around the world. Think copywriting, tone of voice, naming, everything to do with words. They describe themselves as a world's brightest words, and they can talk a bit more about why it's brightest and what do words mean to them. But this means that today's topic is all about brand language, writing, the power of words, everything to do with tone of voice and difficult things that we all experience when we try to write something, from a social media post to an email to a massive campaign that is going global. So I'm excited to ask questions. We also play some games, and there will be people calling in to our studio today who have their questions. So this is super exciting. But I would love to start with actually explaining a bit more what is brand language. So Mike or Sam, who would like to explain what is this topic of brand language and brand writing? What does it all mean?
I'll jump in. It'll probably take both of us, but I think brand language is a term that we tend to use rather than, for example, copywriting or tone of voice, because those things tend to be parts of the puzzle rather than the whole thing. So when people hear copywriting, for example, they tend to think of the very practical business of writing, sentences and the craft of writing, which is critical, but not the whole thing. And equally, tone of voice, which is a very popular phrase to describe how a brand speaks to its audience. Tone we see as half of that story. So tone is about the sort of character of your voice, how you sound, the personality that's coming across. But the other half of the story is obviously what you're saying, the content of your messaging. So all of these things add up to the language of a brand or brand language, if that makes sense.
And yeah, just to add to that, Mike, I think the reason why it matters and why really an agency like ours can exist is that brands now use language in more ways than they ever have done before. So it requires more thought. You think 50 years ago, brands had ads and direct mail and packaging, and that was kind of it. And now we all have so many different channels that we need to think about, and so many different moments where language can stand out or it can go wrong. So really, I think brands are having to work harder and think harder about their language than ever before, which is really where an agency like ours comes in, and where a course like building a brand language comes in.
I totally agree with the problem of writing for so many channels is an issue for lots of companies, including ours. I think we write on social media. We have kind of all sorts of copy and content. So what would you say are the main mistakes that brands do when writing or when working with language?
Oh, that's a very big question. I mean, one of the big jobs that we have working with a brand is to make sure that their voice is consistent across everything they do, and that's often where brands fall down for all sorts of reasons. Partly because consistency itself is very difficult to both define and implement. So by consistent, we don't want to get every single person in a brand writing and speaking in a kind of robotically identical way, but at the same time, their language ideally would all reflect the same central personality and messaging of that brand. So how you balance those two things is really tricky and give people enough freedom, but still give them the guardrails they need to have that consistency. And also the business of implementing that. How do you beyond kind of professional copywriters, essentially, how does everybody else in the organization, which is obviously a far greater number of people, how do they develop the tools and the understanding and the confidence to get that voice across in the right way. Because as marvelous as the team at ReadWords is, we work with big companies. We can't write every single thing that a brand puts out. So helping them to develop the tools and the understanding they need to do it on their own is a really key part of the job. And often that consistency is lacking, and that's often where we're brought in, because a brand has realized that, for example, their advertising doesn't sound anything like their website, or if you get in touch with them with their customer service team, suddenly it feels like you're talking to a different brand, usually quite a more mechanical or kind of old-fashioned or cold voice than what they're hearing in the more high-profile bits of the brand. So I think that's a very big mistake that a lot of brands are making.
And just to add to that, I think one of the other things that brands struggle with is that language is a really slippery thing. It's really hard to manage. And when I think of the way that, say, a visual identity works, is that once you've kind of figured out your new visual identity and the new look and feel, and you've got your Pantone colors, and you've got your logo and the exclusion zone, and you've got all those elements, it's kind of then more, it's kind of easier to see when you've gone off brand, when the colors aren't right. I think language is much harder because we all have slightly different interpretations of what a word like human means or bold means. So it kind of requires a lot, I think it requires a lot more kind of internal discussion and agonizing about, is this the right sort of language for us? I think, it's hard work. And I think that's something that brands sometimes struggle with.
Oh, that's very interesting that you mentioned kind of the comparison with visual identity, because I can totally agree that there is so much emphasis right now on brand guidelines, identity design systems, whatever helps creative teams or marketing teams or companies in general maintain the consistency of visual language and how the brand is represented across, again, social media, website, app, outdoors, whatever the company is doing, while language kind of is not even seen as part of this system, while the way brands communicate with people is not just through visual. There is now all sorts of voice assistants, chatbots, again, places where you don't even see any visual identity. So you have to represent the same values, the same kind of spirit through the power of words. And if that hasn't been written in any sort of way that people can understand, then it is a tricky job to write like a Nike or write like an Apple if no one told you what this exactly means.
Absolutely, I think that's a really big problem, and I mean, I think it's changing slightly, but it's still pretty common to pick up a brand guidelines document or a design system, and a lot of love and craft and care will have gone into the visuals, and then language may have a paragraph or a page or kind of 3 words to sum it up. That doesn't really give writers within an organization and a brand enough to go on. So you're right, if you're writing for Nike and you don't really know what Nike is meant to sound like, then you'll probably just fall back on what you think is best, which, if you're a kind of a talented writer, that might be great. If you're not so confident with it, you may fall back on, a slightly colder, more formal voice, or the way that you were taught to write at school or university. So yeah, I think there's a big job to be done to kind of help brands make the most of their language.
Well, talking about language, I have a game for you. And this will be a fun game where you have to guess which company is talking, and I'll give you options, so don't worry. And I know it's a hard job, and we just talked about how brands actually are not taking care of their language. So without any visual, without any other cues to actually guess which company it is, it's a hard job. So I'm not expecting you to guess it 100%. But as an experiment, let's try it. So, shall we go? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, the first piece. Looking to get ahead? We have expert guidance, timely resources, and inspiring stories from entrepreneurs who've been in your shoes. Business growing shoes. Okay, so this is the piece. And does this belong to A, Bloomberg, B, Forbes, C, MailChimp?
Oh.
Shall I read it out again?
Yeah, could you read that one more time?
Looking to get ahead. We have expert guidance, timely resources, and inspiring stories from entrepreneurs who've been in your shoes, business growing shoes.
Oh, that's really
Oh, I
interesting.
wasn't sure until you said the third one, so I think it's MailChimp.
Yeah, I think business growing shoes is a
Right.
nice little flourish that I don't think the first two, I don't think that's quite in their wheelhouse.
And this is the correct answer. Well done, well done. You're right. I think the last piece definitely kind of identified. I wouldn't expect Bloomberg saying that. I mean, if
Right.
they did, I would be very surprised.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Okay, it gets harder. Be prepared. Have a question? Ask everyone. Our support community can help you find answers.
Okay.
Okay, and is this Dell? Is this Apple? Or is this IBM?
Yeah, that is trickier.
Could
I
you read it
can
one more
read it out
time?
again.
Yes, please.
Have a question? Ask everyone. Our support community can help you find answers.
I think it's Apple.
Yeah,
It
Dell and
feels kind
IBM
of,
feel a little bit more corporate to me.
yeah. I mean, it may be that I've seen this page and that's what's reminding me, but ask everyone, and the kind of very short, clean sentences feel Apple-y to me. So I'll plump for that.
And this is correct answer. Woohoo!
Yay!
2 out of 2. Well done, well done. I have the last piece for it. And you're right. I think that I like how you highlighted the sentence structure, the fact that they're short. I think that's very much the spirit of Apple. Everything very simple, everything very
Right.
short, every clean kind of visual style is very clean. The products are very kind of intuitive and short and easy to use. And the copy is easy to read. I think that makes sense. And I put Dell in there because actually I think Dell is the trickiest in terms of brands because no one knows what Dell might sound like.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a good discussion in design community that there are brands that kind of have to like Apple, they already got it. There are brands like Microsoft that are constantly kind of battling, and there are brands like Dell who no one has a clue
Right.
what's going on there, and they have to always like try to do something, but it's still not there.
No, that's a good point. Just on Apple, I think it's really interesting, and they come up a lot, as you can imagine, in workshops and so forth. And as well, I think why they're so interesting is that they can do it the really short, simple sentences, but a sentence like "ask everyone" has that extra little bit of charm and interest in it, which is very Apple. You know, it could just say, I don't know, ask the community or ask other people, but somehow there's a kind of friendliness and a little touch of warmth in "ask everyone" that it sort of counteracts that very pure simplicity in Apple, and that's the balance that, when they get it right, is very distinctive, I think.
Yeah, I think they put a lot of care into those little flourishes, and it feels a little bit like the way that they treat the TV ads in the UK, where the logo, depending on what the campaign is, has a little kind of flourish, or the logo will animate in a different way. It feels like they're always looking for those little moments where they can slightly raise the game, and it moves beyond just, as Mike said, kind of simple, nice, clean writing.
Great. Okay, we have one left.
Okay.
Okay, this is a copy that goes next to a map. There is a map.
Okay. All right.
You're close, or maybe not so close, but at least you know there will be a perfectly made latte waiting for you when you arrive. Enjoy. And is this a Google map, an Apple map, or an Oatly map?
Is the latte a clue? That's what I'm.
Yeah, that feels like maybe a giveaway.
Kind of got it away, but I couldn't actually take it out. So, but I
No,
felt
no,
like
you
even
couldn't.
without it, I loved how they described like you're close or maybe not so close, and I'm
Right.
like probably Google wouldn't say
No,
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. I think Oatly do a really nice job of that slightly spiky, kind of unexpected voice. I mean, their ad campaigns are very much like that. So yeah, that feels right for them.
amazing. Well done. You got 3 out of 3. This is
That's
amazing. Good
A
job.
huge relief.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I think this is time to bring our first guest into this conversation. And our guest prepared a special question, a challenge that they are facing, and they are ready to ask it. So let me get Christine on the call. Hello, Christine.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you doing, Christine?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you? Nice to see you all.
Yeah, good to have you. Do you want to introduce yourself, Christine? Who you are, where you are, what do you do?
Absolutely. My name is Christina. I'm based in Sweden, and I'm a founder of a concept and design agency in Stockholm. So we started out in August, and currently we have a core team of 4 people. And then we add on a lot of different competences and unique talents when we are doing different projects, depending on a customer and the projects we are working on. So we're working pretty much in collaborations, but it's a fun way of connecting and really focusing our efforts a bit more than just having everyone on our same page, so to speak.
Amazing. So, Christine, you have a question. Would you like to ask it?
Yes, I would. I'm thinking from this whole perspective of brands. I've been working with a lot of different brands during the last decade, and I've seen kind of examples of brands having these clear global communication voices and really pushing out that throughout the sort of the global setup. But then when you come down to the local team, it's not always that coherent, so that it kind of gets a bit confused with the global overall and the local communication. And I think that as a consumer, you get a bit confused in that sense when you see that this is the big voice of a global brand, and then you're interacting with them locally and it's a completely different message. I think that also a lot of people have been talking about this omni-channel perspective and the seamless transition between online and offline. But that kind of feels, to me at least, a bit limited in terms of creating that engaging and inspiring brand. So when I'm looking at how this is affecting our way of connecting and getting engaged, the channel doesn't feel that important to me. It's more about how you can create that coherent voice using visual, verbal, sounds, smells, whatever you can do to sort of get this brand and experience all the way through. And also, of course, the people working on the brand, super important that they are also part of it. So for the last 12, 14 months, I've been working on this amazing project where we've been kind of taking on all aspects. It's kind of a startup project. So all the business perspectives and the brands and the service offer and everything is coming together in this mix match of things going on at the same time. And it makes it, of course, very complex. And you need to be sort of very agile and dynamic and do all these things from the day-to-day business because everything is changing. And I think that what we experience a bit is that the challenge that when we are moving through these different phases, it's hard to have that coherent voice. It's hard to, as decisions shifts, changes, directions, developments, and everything all at once, how to kind of have both the people working on the brand and also the experience on the brand, since we're also having it out on the market, somehow coherent. So this is my question then, after this long introduction. When we're working on these kind of startup projects, what would be your best advice to try to secure and engage and establish, and also to keep this strong and clear brand voice throughout the different phases?
That's a very good question, a very big one. We've just been talking a little bit about that consistency and coherence that I think you're talking about. So I'll start off, but I think, I don't know what the startup's like that you're working with, but often that's actually quite an advantage because when you're dealing with a startup, you tend to be dealing with a smaller team. And getting both the buy-in and the sign-off on the voice is relatively easier compared to working, for example, with a big global company with, as you say, lots of different offices and so forth. And that's really a key point because we think that your brand language, your voice is not something that's just a nice thing that happens in the advertising or whatever. It should be running through, as you say, that every aspect of what that brand's doing, which means it needs to be championed from the top, really. You want the founder or the CEO, the person or people in the leadership team to really get behind it and make it part of the culture, essentially, which is not an easy thing to do, obviously. But if you can get that kind of championing of the voice from the leadership, then you've got a much better chance of it filtering down through the organization and being taken up and taken seriously throughout. Because we certainly find, as we've just been talking to with Katarina, some brands just don't get how serious language is still. And obviously people within an organization have got their own jobs to do. They've got lots of other things to worry about. How I write might not seem that big a deal to them. So there's often an educational job to do. Like, this really matters, and you often have to have literally workshop sessions where you'll present examples of brand language going right and wrong, and when you start to do that, people really click and they get it. But unless you do that, unless you sort of wake people up, if you like, to how much of an impact their language is having, it's very difficult to then get them to work on it and to focus on it. And beyond that, of course, you have to start giving them the tools to actually put that into action as well.
I also feel a bit like a lot of people that are involved in these kind of projects also, they aren't that into it until it kind of comes to their part of the table. And all of a sudden it feels super important because, oh, now I'm affected by this. So I need to get on the bandwagon as well. And then you kind of haven't been part of it on the journey there.
Yeah, that's really true. It just makes me think that a lot of the time, the thing that we hear about a lot, or clients talk about a lot, is social media, Twitter essentially, or sometimes Instagram. And I think that's partly because what you're talking about. When you look at Twitter, you're basically looking at words. So it becomes super important, and people are very worried about how they sound in a way that they're not in other spheres. So we'll often hear, well, how should we be talking on Twitter? I'm like, I think you should be thinking about how you talk generally everywhere. And it becomes way too specific, which I think is exactly what you're talking about. The focus happens only when it's on your desk. Otherwise it gets forgotten, which is why you need to have it led from the top, obviously. Sorry, Sam.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's why when you're kind of starting to think about language and starting to build your voice, it's really important to have different representatives in the room or part of the process, even if they only kind of dip in and out, because the worst thing is that you kind of create a voice and then you discover that it doesn't work for your legal team or your recruitment team or sales team or whoever it may be. So sort of the kind of the beginning process should be figuring out all the different jobs that your voice has to do, all the different audiences, the problems, responding to customer complaints versus talking on Twitter. So yeah, I think that sometimes it can feel like a voice is, it's just sort of something that the branding and marketing team think about. I think it's kind of beneficial if you can extend that out at the beginning.
It makes perfect sense. And I think that also a thing that can be a challenge, at least for us in Sweden, we often work in multicultural teams, which means that we are talking in English during meetings and sort of when we are doing the work. And then it's going to translate into Swedish when it hits the market. Right. And that also brings a bit of a twist to it.
Yeah, that's tricky, definitely. I don't know how you're handling that. Do you have translators or transcreated people involved?
Yeah, we do. We do a little bit of both, but I can absolutely say that it's one of the things that you can really feel in some of the meetings, that you can have an idea of this tonality that you are trying to get across, and then it also end up being in risk of being a marketing PR kind of thing, because that's where you're using that language, and in all other sense of the brand you are talking in a different language altogether.
Right.
But yeah, you need to work with copywriters that really kind of understand both sides, so that they can feel the English tonality, but also have a very strong sense of the local language. So yeah, that's how we have solved it for this project, at least. But yeah,
actually, if I can add to that, because I worked on a project that was bilingual in Russian and English here in London, and it was quite interesting how we worked with brilliant copywriters in London who wrote some fantastic copy that was just witty and humorous and well constructed, and that could not translate into Russian in any sort of way, just because their sentence structure was different, because some of the words do not exist in Russian. So before, what the company was doing, they were hiring translators and copywriters who would then try to basically recreate this in Russian. While what we realized after working on this project for a bit, that it doesn't even make sense to create any copy in English without the Russian copywriters being involved in the beginning. And when the British copywriter is coming up with this wonderful short slogan, then the kind of sense checking, would that translate? Do you think there is some sort of meaning? Is there any bad meaning when we say it in that way? So again, having the bilingual people from the beginning actually avoids a lot of trouble at the end of the project. That's from my personal experience.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually something we hear occasionally from clients or prospective clients who are slightly worried that because we're predominantly British copywriters that we're going to write in a sort of British style. I think a good copywriter should be able to kind of rein that in, because you're right, sort of witticisms and wordplay and the kind of very kind of British puns are not going to work for most brands. So yeah, I think that's a really important skill that a copywriter has to have, is to imagine how is this going to work for audiences that I might not have a kind of great cultural understanding of.
But how important is that cultural understanding, would you say, when you're working with different? So you're based in the UK, and how much is that affecting when you're working with global customers?
It varies, to be honest with you. So there are some clients who have a very specific need to take the language that we create here in London into other territories and markets and languages and cultures. So I'm thinking particularly of Heinz, for example, who we worked with the last couple of years on their master brand tone of voice. So not any particular product, but Heinz itself. And as you can imagine, they need that voice to work in very many different countries around the world. So we work closely with a transcreation agency in that case, and they were able to take what we did and give it the right cultural resonances and associations and all of that within their cultures. But an important part of being able to do that is for us, as Sam said, to know from the start that's what we're doing, so that we can write the English with that in mind and not fall into very idiomatic English things that, as Katerina says, are just not going to translate, or things like that. So a lot of the time that means keeping it a bit more simple, but that's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean you're losing character, which I think some people worry about. It just means being responsive to what the needs are that of that project. I always think that one of the absolute essential skills of any good writer is listening. It's no good just to come and say, we need to do it like this. You have to start by asking and listening to what people actually need and how a voice is going to have to work and who's going to need to use it and all of those questions. And obviously languages and cultures are an important part of that when you're dealing with a global brand. So listen hard at the beginning and then make sure that what we do is going to work in all of those different ways.
I have one more question. When you're working with, because I've worked quite a lot with a brand called Lenovo, who has kind of they have this big brand, and then they have a lot of sub brands. And for some years, they didn't really connect them. So the Lenovo brand was one brand, and then they had all the other kind of sub brands, but they didn't really connect them, which felt a bit disconnecting in terms of also the brand voice. So when they were launching a new product, for instance, trying to get that to match the overall message of the brand and so on and so forth was a bit of a challenge. But when they kind of connected and said, okay, there's one Lenovo on top, and then you have all the different underneath, then you had the opportunity to actually create a story that went on beyond just one product launch or one specific campaign. What's your experience on those projects when you have?
I'm trying to think of any specifics. I can't immediately, but I think again it's about the specifics of the project. So there's the famous distinction between a house of brands or a branded house. So some companies have very distinct brands within their architecture that have their own voices, their own messaging, and as Unilever and Procter & Gamble are the classic examples, where their product brands are doing their own thing. A lot of consumers won't even know who their kind of background the Lenovo version is.
Mm.
So again, I think that's about understanding the brand you're writing for, and not doing things that you shouldn't be doing. If it's a branded house and everything is called one name or a version of one name, and it's very clearly branded with that larger brand, and I think you're right. You've got a really lovely opportunity there to make all of those sub-brands into parts of the same story, and you need to make sure that the same core messages and core personality are coming through in all of those different places. And a lot of that is about, I think, simplifying. Trying to make the core of it as simple as possible. Often these things get so complicated that it's not surprising people getting lost when they have to write, I don't know, an email campaign for one of the product brands, and they're looking at a set of guidelines which has 6 archetypes and 7 schematic territories, or all sorts of things. We are always telling clients to kind of pare it back, and let's make this simpler. Let's have a few words, a few big ideas that are translatable, and not feel like you're trying to solve some sort of Rubik's Cube of messaging every time you pick up a brief.
Yeah, I think we worked with Merlin Entertainments a couple of years ago, who kind of
that's a good example. Yeah,
they have Sea Life and Madame Tussauds and Shrek's Adventure in London, and each of those sort of sub brands absolutely deserve their own voice. They have their different experiences, they have different personalities. So I think the question is, does the sub brand need its own approach to language? I think most of the time, as Mike said, it's just simpler from a kind of management point of view, just to kind of think about what's the voice for the entire brand, the entire organization, rather than, we often see voice guidelines where you have a kind of an appendix for different sub brands and different audiences and different channels, and I think it's kind of overwhelming for a copywriter or any writer coming to that. So the fewer the elements, the simpler you can make it, the better. If a brand really deserves, or a sub brand really deserves its own thing, then absolutely. But most of the time, I think we would kind of err on the simpler is better.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Christina, for your amazing questions. And it's such an interesting conversation kind of about the different territories and different brands, as well as different languages. I feel like that could be its own podcast, how brands should communicate across the world. So thanks for bringing that topic up. We'll let you go now to your busy day. Thank you so much for joining. And we will continue with Sam and Mike with another game on the way.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, and we're back to 3 of us, and I have the next game prepared, and this is a tough one, so be prepared. So the rules of the game, we talked about the brand language and brand voice and tone of voice and all of these very important things, and how brands should communicate depending on what they stand for and what they represent. And actually, part of the course that you created at Future London Academy is all about finding that persona that kind of you might think would be talking for your brand, whether it is an kind of I don't know, a Trump persona, or but a kind of some person that you can associate your brand with. So I decided to play a game based on this interesting observation, and I have a pile of papers that have personas in them, so famous celebrities that kind of have very distinct tone of voice, and I have a separate pile with products and services that these celebrities might have or might not never create, and your task will be to come up with a strapline for this particular product. Could be as short or as long as you want. So I don't know, if I pick Steve Jobs and I pick I don't know, a plant service, I don't know, yogurts. If Steve Jobs created a yogurt, what would be the strapline for Steve Jobs' yogurt? So I have lots of those, and I'll close my eyes and mix the two, so it will be very random. And of course, we know that copywriting is not done on the spot. It actually takes a very long time. So not expecting the best straplines in the world, but let's have a bit of fun and experiment.
I'm glad.
Sure.
Okay, let me pick the person. So I have people on, actually, people here. Okay. Okay, closing my eyes. And we've got Kensington Palace
Oh, okay.
as a personality, and I suppose it stands for royal and I don't know, heritage and kind of all sorts of things, very British.
Mhm.
And what service are they having? So what product are they launching? So they are launching a cleaning service. So Kensington Palace is launching a new cleaning service. What would be their strapline for Kensington Palace cleaning service?
Oof.
Maybe cleaning fit for queens.
Yeah.
Nice.
Make every house a palace.
Oh yeah,
Ooh.
I like that.
Love
Well,
it.
you go straight to the puns at this point. I have to say.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a home fit for a queen or fit for a king. So that feels an obvious possibility.
Nice. I like the idea of a palace. I think that's a good one.
Yeah. Give your home the royal treatment.
Nice. Okay, great ideas. We're going moving to the next one. Okay, and it's
I've got another
Oprah Winfrey
Okay.
is the personality, and she's launching a furniture service,
Furniture service.
or rather
Right.
furniture brand, maybe a
Right.
chair, an
Right.
armchair.
Yeah, chair would be good for Oprah, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, blimey.
And I suppose I'll start the conversation. Oprah stands for, I suppose, empathy and being relatable and listening. At least that's what she stands for in my head.
Yeah, and she's got a really unique voice. It's that kind of inspiring, but also very down to earth, tricky one.
Yeah.
Maybe something like if she was selling chairs, it could be like chairs to get you talking, or
Take a seat with Oprah.
yeah, that's nice.
Oh, blimey. I've gone completely blank on this one. It's a tough brief. The Winfrey name sort of. There must be a win something.
Yeah.
You'll always win with a Winfrey.
Yeah,
Showing my age there. That's a kind of 1950s slogan. Yeah.
Yeah,
This is the point where we say to the client, leave that with us.
Leave that with us.
We'll come back to you in a week.
Okay, I'll have the last one. Let's. I think.
Oh, another one. Okay.
Last one, and we can stop this torture. Okay. Let me pick the last one. And we got Elon Musk.
Okay.
And what does Elon Musk produce? He now produces cakes. Elon Musk cakes.
Elon Musk cake.
Yeah,
To be honest,
that's
he
quite
produced
nice.
so many weird things in the past year, from flamethrowers to, I think, was it swimsuits? I forgot. There were some
Right.
random objects.
There were.
And I suppose Elon Musk stands for kind of innovation and progress, a bit obnoxious character.
Yeah, he's got a kind of spiky voice. I'm thinking of lots of words like transformed or reinvented.
Right. It's a funny one, this, because Tesla, which is obviously the most famous Elon Musk brand, doesn't really have a tone of voice. They don't do any advertising famously, and if you look at their website, there's language is very minimal, so it's hard to get a handle on it quite. I just keep going for puns again. The Musk have cakes.
Nice one.
Oh, God. But I think Sam's right. You feel like it should be a kind of some big claim, like
Yeah.
cakes to change the world. Or,
Cakes to change the world,
Yeah.
exactly.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think that'll definitely make the cake stand out.
yeah, you think? Okay,
Yeah, I think
sold.
approved. Yeah, the client. That's the new strapline. Well, we'll find out. If Elon Musk decide to produce cakes, actually, it's an interesting things to do. I suppose. I think his flamethrowers were like thousands of dollars each.
Yeah, presumably.
So the cakes probably will be in the same price range.
Yeah.
And definitely they'll change the world.
Exactly. He
Wonderful.
knows how to call.
Amazing. Thank you so much for going through this
Oh.
tough exercise. I hope your brains don't hurt. I know it's very difficult to think on the spot, especially on so many random subjects without any preparation whatsoever. So I
think our brains are okay. The pride maybe has taken us. But, we'll recover.
You did really well. You did really well. I have to say, I was trying to think of something in my head. There was silence. There was no single thought. So you did much better than me.
It's a good proof that this stuff takes time and therefore costs lots of money, which is a very useful message for us.
That is very, very true. Okay, and we are ready for our next caller. And let me get George on a call with us. Hey, George.
Hi.
Amazing. How are you doing, George?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Just a bit of background. Like, I'm a designer based in London, and I've been working in the industry for about 3 years, so it's quite early days for me. And I've worked in in-house design teams for in the arts or in design agencies, and also in education. And the question I'm bringing to you is all about authenticity, because I found in branding and advertising, it's a very familiar word that a lot of people use, but without the context, it's very abstract and hollow. And basically, drawing from your own experiences, I want to ask you, do you have like a really good example of what is like authentic brand language, and what's a really bad example?
I think it's a really good question. You're right. People chuck that word around a lot, and it's often hard to know exactly what they mean by authentic. I think a lot of people use it to mean a kind of something very grand and noble, and sort of, we're truthful and words like that. I think I would take it usually to mean, is this a voice that is genuine? It's really about it's really reflecting what this brand is about. I don't know if that's how you're meaning it exactly.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of it really. And I guess one example, I think a very specific example in like social media of like everyone's telling you to sort of be your authentic self, but what does that really mean? I don't know. So I guess what's a way that I don't know, a company could really tap into that without sounding kind of inconsistent. Like they say one thing like on social media, but then I don't know, they're like terms and conditions or their website, it's very much formal and like not the same tone.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it's often really glaring when something has gone wrong in the brand experience. Let's say you're making a customer complaint, or maybe you're getting an email telling you that your delivery is going to be late, and that the voice suddenly switches and it becomes much more cold and corporate. I think that's when audiences and customers, that really annoys them, because it feels like the curtain has been pulled back, and all the kind of nice language that they saw up front on the homepage and on Twitter and in the ads, you realize, oh, actually all that stuff was just kind of fluff and glitter, and actually underneath the brand is a big kind of cold corporate machine. So I think that's where inauthenticity becomes a real problem, because people spot that immediately. So yeah, the brands that do the best job with this are the ones that really consider it across all of those different touch points, and they invest the time to make sure that the customer services team is sounding exactly like the social team and like the ads. It's a really hard thing to do, but I think it's essential.
Is there like a brand, not necessarily one you've worked with, but like one that really sort of is a good example of that really like conveys that to their audience?
Yeah, I think I don't know if you know Typeform. They're a kind of SurveyMonkey type thing. I think they're based in Barcelona.
Yeah,
and they're very kind of, I don't know how you describe their voice. It's very kind of light and kind of energetic. And you can kind of see that as soon as you land on their homepage, and they have jokes and they have fun. They also, though, translate that voice into the terms and conditions, into like when you sign in to the platform for the first time. The kind of sign-in forms, the little ghost copy there is also light and fun. I think they just it just shows that they care about their language, which I think subtly tells you that they care about their product. I don't really use Typeform. I don't know how they work. I don't know whether that's true, but you just kind of get the sense that these are people that take care of everything they do. So yeah, I think they're a really nice example of making the most of all of these tiny little moments that overall kind of create a really nice impression for a brand.
So, just quick note, I think you went a bit quiet. If you can get closer to your mic so we can hear all your insights a bit better.
I think Sam's absolutely right about that, and it's quite interesting for me. It's like, is that an example of an authentic voice, or is it an example of a very well managed voice? And is there a difference between those two things? You get into quite interesting territory there. Another one that I always think of is Virgin Atlantic, who have been on their flights a few times and use their websites and things, and their voice tends to be pretty consistent and feels, as well as being consistent, it feels like the Virgin I know, and that it seems to connect with a sense that I have of what Virgin is all about, which obviously that's basically what brand is, right? It's what the idea you have of it in your head. And they do that, I think, for those two reasons. They've managed to work out what they're all about internally at that kind of core level. They've got a very clear sense of that. So before you even start to think about language, you have to have a really good, clear articulation of what it is that you're all about. And then to your point, and what Sam was talking about, make sure that that is coming through, not just on a big splashy billboard or a TV ad, but if you go on a Virgin Atlantic flight, for example, you pick up the menu and it says "Hello, you" at the beginning, which is just it's got the right level of kind of cheek and slightly over friendly, but in kind of quite a nice way that you expect from it. And I wouldn't necessarily write that headline myself, but when I read it, I go, yes, that's right. That's the Virgin voice. I recognize it. So, and it makes me smile, partly because they're getting it so right, and also because it's quite funny. And I remember going on their credit card site, so Virgin Atlantic credit card, and you can kind of get all the information about the card, but then it also has a little login thing that says, already a customer? Clever sausage, come on in, or something like that. I can't remember exact words, but again, a bit cheeky, not what you expect in a credit card environment, but because it's Virgin Atlantic, that gives them the license to do it, and that becomes an authentic way of expressing that brand. So the more of those things happen, the better I feel about that brand, because I think they're entertaining me a bit, but also they clearly care about all this stuff, and they're getting it right even on very small details, and that is very reassuring actually in lots of ways. I feel like this is a company I can trust. Especially when they're flying you across the Atlantic, you need to know that.
Yeah, no, I think Virgin's a really good example because they just have a history of that kind of tongue-in-cheek tone of voice.
Right.
Even to the point from their name, like Virgin, it just sort of means very naive and not sure what they're doing. But I guess people can approach that because they feel human in the real sense of it, and they've sort of defined that for them.
Yeah, I think that's right. So another really good example of something that was once upon a time basically one man, Branson's, but they've managed to take a lot of those values and carry them through for the very long time since, through all their sub brands and so forth. Greater successes and lesser along the way, but I think the airline is a very good example of that.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think other brands often look at a brand like Virgin or innocently have a kind of nice, playful, cheeky voice and think, well, maybe we can kind of shortcut our way to that voice and start using it. If you don't have the kind of history and the credibility to back it up, then I think that often turns customers off. I don't know if you remember when Barclays renamed all their ATMs Hole in the Wall, and it just felt like a kind of a moment of over friendliness and levity that Barclays, the big global bank, probably didn't deserve, and they kind of turned people off. So yeah, I think those sorts of voices are often very desirable for brands, but unless you've got the kind of stuff to back it up, it can backfire.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, those are really good examples. And I don't know if I have time for one quick question, but mine's more about obviously there's brand language, but mine's more sort of straight up writing and writing skills. And in my current design role now, I do a lot of writing in digital channels like social media and newsletters. And I kind of I'm kind of self-taught. I want to kind of practice my writing skills. And I do a lot of free writing to kind of break the sort of creative writing block and anxiety of writing, because I'm kind of a novice. I was just wondering if you guys had any sort of general tips to or exercises to improve your writing skills. Even if it's like building your vocabulary, so you don't like find yourself just going back to the thesaurus like online and just sort of getting stuck.
I should just say on that last point, we all refer to the thesaurus.
Yeah.
And, I think there's a perception that it's somehow cheating, and it really isn't. It's using the tools of the trade. So I don't feel any shame about that. This is a really tricky one because I mean basically everyone except a professional writer is a novice writer, right? Yeah, and that's what we come up against all the time is people are being asked to do something that is actually quite hard, and it's a sort of assumption that everyone can just jump in and do it. Free writing, I think, is a really good way, as you say, to get past a block, just to kind of write something else, anything else, and not worry about what it's going to be. That's good. One of the tips we often have in our guidelines is to read stuff aloud. It's amazing what you hear in your ears that you don't see on the page. So it feels a bit silly, but if you read it out and see if it sounds to yourself like the brand you're trying to write for, and of course if it makes sense at all. Often you read it out and think, oh yeah, that sounds weird, or that that doesn't make sense. And obviously reading it to somebody else if they're there and if you can bear it is that's a good one. Sam.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like you're kind of doing this already, but stretching the different types of writing you do. So if you're doing lots of newsletters and social, a good way of kind of flexing your writing muscles and kind of coming up against different challenges is maybe just take a totally different type of writing that you would never normally do and think about, okay, well, how do I bring the brand into this? What does this mean for my writing? If I'm used to writing in kind of a Twitter voice, what does it mean when I'm apologizing to someone or I'm trying to explain something really complicated? I think often we all get like this as writers, we get kind of stuck in a rut of doing the same sort of thing. And so I think just setting yourself different challenges will hopefully try and kind of break you out of that and stretch those muscles.
Thank you so much, George, for your lovely questions. We'll let you go as well, but thanks for joining, and very, very important topic of authenticity and writing in general. I think I definitely struggle with writing, so thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me.
Thanks,
have a great afternoon.
Great to meet you, George.
Bye.
Okay, and we are back to three of us to the last chapter of this conversation. And I think what George touched on was something that I actually wanted to ask you as well, around authenticity and other words that we use when we refer to writing. And some of them are, for example, human or friendly or simple. And again, every brand or majority of brands, I would say, want to sound friendly and easy to read and all of these things. And the problem is, I was born in Russia, so I was taught how to write in Russian. I understand the language structures, the certain kind of flavor that different words can bring, and my vocabulary is mainly based on classic Russian literature, which is beautiful. So I understand that I'm lacking all this, on one hand, vocabulary, on the other hand, the practice of different language structures and different principles I can use in writing to be friendlier or to be more human, or maybe to be more I don't know, not strict, but maybe it's more formal and more clear and straightforward, whatever that is. So could you tell a bit more, how would you approach a certain writing style, or when you're trying to convey something? Are there any particular things you would look at? For example, you would always check the length, like the length of the sentence, watch out for certain words. You would always... Are there any basically practical things that we can all look at when we're trying to do certain type of writing, whether it's friendly writing or maybe more straightforward writing or anything like that?
Yeah, I think there really are, and I think if you think a lot of the kind of most successful brands right now, I'm thinking of people like Monzo and MailChimp. I think they've kind of perfected the art of that kind of friendly, clear, easy to understand writing, and they're all kind of doing the same sorts of things. So first thing they do is they always talk in first person, so it's we, Monzo, are talking to you, the customer, rather than Monzo is delighted to inform its customers about its new offering, for example. So that is, I think, probably the single quickest way of making yourself sound more human, because, well, you are a human and you're writing to another human. So that's kind of the first thing I would do. And then, I think kind of sentence length. I think big, long, wordy paragraphs, big blocks of text. That's kind of fine for your kind of first draft. But if you have time, kind of going back through and editing it and trying to make it as easy to read as possible, because increasingly we don't want to spend the time with big blocks of text, and we want to kind of get through it as quickly as possible, and kind of helping your reader do that just makes you feel like a more kind of considerate writer. So I think there are two things that I would do kind of almost immediately.
Yeah, I go along with that. I think this is often a meeting point of what's just good writing and what is the brand. And actually, for most brands, just writing well takes them a long way. And before you even start to think about what the distinctive particular personality of that brand is. So second everything that Sam's saying. I think obviously once you know what sort of human you're trying to be, as you say, Katerina, are you being more formal or more friendly, or are you trying to be a Virgin Atlantic type human? All those things. That's obviously going to change the rules in big quote marks. But the kind of things to look at are things like sentence length and rhythm of the words, which is quite a subtle thing, I appreciate. But a lot of people will say, "Oh, we're a very kind of fast-moving brand, so all our sentences be really short." But of course, if they're all really short, you get this weird staccato kind of boring rhythm where everything's the same. And equally, if a luxury brand might say, we need long, flowing, beautiful sentences, which is great in some of those examples, but then all you're reading are long, flowing, beautiful sentences, and again, it feels tedious. So mixing it up in some way is always helpful, keeping the kind of the core of it in one level, but making sure that you're mixing that pace up and keeping the reader's interest. That's obviously a basic thing that any writing has to do, is to keep the reader reading. And if you stick with one rhythm, you're going to lose them because it just becomes boring to read.
And do you do any sort of research when you're trying to convey certain tone of voice? Again, if I translate this to the branding world, if we decided to create a brand that is very royal and very luxurious and very we would potentially create a mood board or find some references. What does it mean, and what kind of things we can pick up on? Would it be gold, or maybe something more subtle that constitutes being royal and being this kind of high class? Do you do the same with writing? Do you find different pieces of writing that constitute certain things when you create a piece?
Well, either we find them or we create them ourselves, just to kind of test out exactly what a word like royal means. So you're absolutely right. I think one of the problems when brands think about their language is, big kind of abstract concepts like human or royal or bold get thrown around without really thinking, well, what does that exactly mean for our brand of furniture or our brand of cakes? So it's really kind of figuring that stuff out. The best way to do that is just to start writing stuff and kind of testing a few different directions. So then you can kind of present that to the client or present that to the rest of your team and say, well, is this the kind of royal we mean? It's a bit cold and snooty, or is it kind of the Kate Middleton royal, which feels, more accessible and warmer? So I think it's kind of really digging into those words and what exactly does that mean on the page, and what does that mean for a social post versus an email or whatever. I think that's the bit that is really useful for kind of everyone getting a shared understanding of what exactly is this voice going to be.
Yeah, and we have used other brands as well, obviously, for that. In the luxury field, for example, people will say we need a really lovely luxury voice, and we will present them. Here's Asprey talking, or here's Bentley talking, or here's a champagne brand or something. And you quickly realise that there are very many nuances and sometimes quite big differences within what people think of as a very straightforward category. So just showing them other examples obviously helps them to say, I mean more like this, or definitely not like that, and that's always the point at which you ask them why, and then you start to learn really deep things about what their brand's all about, because they have often quite strong reactions and say, we're definitely not that sort of voice, and then finding out why they're definitely not that is a very good guide to what they should be. So I think you're right, that kind of mood boardy of a verbal version of the mood board, it can be very useful.
Love it. And I wanted to finish with a kind of last question on general, I suppose, future of brand voices and the trends in brand voices. What I personally see a lot happening in the industry, again, if we take a parallel with branding, all the logos are kind of going towards the same shapes and same forms. And similar way, the brand language, I have a feeling, kind of is trying to become very similar. The whole friendly, human, approachable, easy. That's what every tech startup, every company now tries to be, which again makes it, I suppose, less distinct, because when you're the first one who is so approachable and human, then you're definitely very different. And now when everyone is the same, you probably kind of distinguish. And again, in examples today, because everyone tried to be so human, it's sometimes difficult to say, is it Mailchimp human or is it like Typeform human? So what, first of all, is there like an opposite trend that maybe I'm not seeing that you also see is very interesting, and maybe a way for brands to think about their language that is not just pure friendly and human? And I suppose, are there any ways to differentiate yourself in that friendly human area?
A big question. I think I think you're right that lots of brands are kind of converging all around this, clean, accessible, easy to read voice, and predominantly that tends to be, I don't know, fintech brands or brands that are offering relatively complicated processes where they have to explain things clearly, and that they need the user and the reader to go from point A to B, and they can't afford for them to get lost, and so that kind of almost demands really kind of clean and simple language. So yeah, I think that's probably true and probably not going to change anytime soon. But I think equally the smarter brands will figure out, even where we do have to make things as really clear as possible and where the shopping experience needs to be seamless and easy, where are those moments that we can add our voice without kind of disrupting or getting in the way. So a very quick plug, but we worked with Penhaligon's, the British perfume brand, and that voice is very kind of flowery and full of flourishes, and when you translate that into the website, it needs to work as a website. It needs to be clear and easy to use, but we're also looking for moments where we can bring in and retain that voice. So yeah, I think it's probably going to get harder, but the brands that do it well, I think, will continue to stand out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think people sometimes worry a little bit too much about, how do we make our voice distinctive? Because that's just not possible for every brand to have a purely, a voice that's so distinctive you can't not recognize it. That's not really the point a lot of the time. Penhaligon's is a really good example of a voice that I think is that level of distinctive, and it's great because the opportunity was there. But just writing it in, to go back to what we were talking about, writing in an authentic way that is true to the brand and that is consistent and coherent across the piece takes you a very long way, and that helps to build the relationship you have with your audiences and all of that. And of course, you've got all the other assets in your brand as well, the logos and colors and so forth, to make you distinctive in other ways. So I think worry less about, how can we not sound like everybody else, and think more about how can we sound like ourselves all the time.
That is a brilliant advice. I feel like that could be put in a quote and put on a wall. Don't try to stand out, but be yourself. Wonderful way to finish our conversation. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And for everyone who is listening and want to hear more wisdom and knowledge from Mike and Sam, I'm sure you've already seen that we have Building a Brand Language course on our website, which Mike and Sam created carefully for you, so you can actually use those practices. And there are much more practical advice and frameworks and templates how to build your own brand language, how to create naming. And we didn't even touch on the naming today, but that's a pain that I had for a very long time in my life, on how to name new things, whether it's a new sub brand, a new project, a new initiative, or you're creating a new company. It becomes a massive mess. And I loved how you approach naming workshops and naming projects in a very strategic way. So everyone who wants to know more about writing for a brand like a human, please do check out the course. And everyone who wants to hear more of these conversations, we also have our YouTube and podcast. Please sign up to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and press all these wonderful buttons that technology has, as well as Creative Capes podcast. Do subscribe for new episodes. Okay, I've done with my long ending. Simon, Mike, any last words from you?
Oh, golly, no, well, only thank you very much. It's been really interesting, really lovely to talk to you and your guests and to have this opportunity. So thank you for that. It's been great.
Thanks, both of you. I learned a lot for sure. So I hope everyone who has been listening also had time to reflect on their language and their brand voice. And actually, not just the brand voice in general, how we all write emails and communicate to each other. What are we trying to say and how clearly and friendly and humanly are we saying this? I feel like we can all improve on our written communication. So thank you for sharing all your advice. And thanks everyone for tuning in and listening.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. And until next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.